When bike touring, you're going to be outside, and like any other outdoor activity, you're going to have to deal with the elements. If you have any experience at all outdoors, you know what I'm talking about. So this video is about bike touring and the elements. How do you deal with the weather when you're out bike touring? Sometimes the weather's perfect, but usually it's not. Usually it's either too wet or too dry, too hot or too cold. So how do you stay comfortable and still enjoy your bike tour even though the weather sometimes is a little sketchy? So what's perfect weather for you? If I could pick my own weather when out bike touring, it would be something like 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit with a little bit of cloud cover and little or no wind. Your perfect bike touring weather might be different than that, but I could tell you this, it's almost never perfect. Sometimes, but not too often. The weather's always changing. Here in Southern Illinois, they got a saying, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. It'll change. So let's first talk about rain. What do you do when it rains? You know, there's different kinds of rain. Anything from a light drizzle to an all-out raining cats and dogs downpour. Sometimes it rains for just a little bit. Sometimes it rains all day. Sometimes it can rain for 4 or 5 days straight. One time, I was bike touring and it started raining sideways. A light rain on a hot summer day feels good, but that same rain, when the temperature's 38 degrees Fahrenheit, can be miserable. So how do you deal with the rain? Good rain gear is essential to staying warm. Notice I didn't say dry, because when you're out bike touring and it starts raining, even with rain gear, you're still going to get wet. But the objective is to stay warm and not get hypothermia. Hypothermia is brought on by 3 things: cold, wet, and wind. And when you're out bike touring in the rain, you've already got 2 of those. Throw in cold, and now you're a candidate for hypothermia. Another hazard associated with rain is lightning. I love a good lightning storm when tucked away under a shelter. But when I'm out bike touring and exposed, and I see lightning strike close by, I get a little bit nervous, and I start looking for shelter. Remember the 5-second rule. When you see lightning, start counting. For every 5-second delay between seeing the bolt and hearing the thunder, that's 1 mile. So if you see lightning, and it takes 15 seconds for that sound to get to you, that means that lightning bolt struck 3 miles away. If you see lightning, and that clap of thunder is less than a second behind it, you're in a bad spot. Another hazard associated with rain when bike touring is wet roads. When you're flying down a big hill on a wet road and you hit a curve at the bottom, that could send you sailing. Plus, if you got rim brakes and your rims get wet, your brakes are less effective. Also keep in mind that when it's raining, you're less visible to motorists. They can't see you as well. You got to stay warm, but you also got to keep your gear dry. Keeping your gear dry is important for obvious reasons, but water's heavy. And when your gear gets wet, that means you're carrying extra weight. Rain covers for your panniers in an all-day rain sounds like a good idea. But if it's raining on and off all day, are you going to put on those rain covers and take them off and put on those rain covers and take them off? Or just ride with them all day even though it's not raining? Now they have waterproof panniers. When I first started touring, they didn't have waterproof panniers. There was nothing waterproof. Panniers are water resistant. Anyways, I keep my gear dry by packing everything in plastic bags. Plastic bags are lightweight and they don't cost very much. Dry sacks are really nice, but they're kind of expensive. And what if you get a hole in one? Alright, so what about the other extreme? What if it's too dry? I'm talking, what if you're riding across the desert? How do you deal with that? I guess the greatest danger there is dehydration. So the trick is to stay hydrated. And there's only one way to do that, and that's drink lots of water. Remember, drink before you get thirsty. Dehydration's a killer, and it sneaks up on you. Once you're dehydrated and thirsty, you can drink and drink and drink, and it seems like you never get unthirsty. Usually when out bike touring, it's not hard to find water. The times that I've run out of water, it was due to poor planning on my part. Yeah, if I would have planned ahead and packed that extra quart of water, I would have been just fine. Problem is, water's a little heavy, and I don't want to carry extra water if I don't need to. So I guess the answer is pack that extra water and just drink it. It's better to have that water in your body than on your bike. First of all, it's important that you start the day hydrated. Drink lots of water in the morning before you even get going. Remember, caffeine is a diuretic. What that means is it makes you pee more. And by peeing more, you're going to get dehydrated faster. That extra water you're carrying, drink early and drink often. Just start drinking it. When I was riding in Nevada, I packed about 7 or 8 quarts of water in the morning, and I would drink about half of it before noon. So I like to save the Gatorade for the end of the day. During the day, I just drink lots of water. If I'm worried about electrolytes, I'll just put a little extra salt on my food or buy a bag of chips or something like that. Even drinking a lot of water, sometimes it's hard not to get dehydrated. So at the end of the day, make sure that you rehydrate. But don't mess with dehydration. It's a killer, especially in combination with its best buddy, heat stroke, sometimes known as heat exhaustion or hyperthermia. So what do you do when it gets too hot? Well, I don't know what's too hot for you. For me, when the temps get into the upper 80s and low 90s, it starts getting uncomfortable, especially when you throw in some humidity. When it gets into the upper 90s, I start taking precautions, and when it gets over 100, I start looking for an air-conditioned hotel. The good news is that usually when it gets that hot, it's not that hot all day, just during the hottest part of the day. There's usually some rideable hours in the morning or late afternoon. That's my reason for getting an early start. The hottest part of the day is usually between 1 and 4 o'clock. After 4 o'clock, usually it starts to cool back down again. So if you're out touring and you hit a stretch of hot weather, just try not to overexert yourself during that hottest part of the day. The key is thermal regulation. Just ask a reptile. Manage your heat early. In other words, don't wait until you start experiencing symptoms of heat stroke before you start taking precautions. Drink lots of water and find some shade every once in a while and let your body cool off. And if it really gets hot, just get off the road. Find a cool room, cool off. I've never tried it, but sometimes bike tours riding across the desert, they'll take a night ride. That means you sleep all day, wait till the sun goes down, and then ride at night when it's cool. Sounds like fun, but it seems like there could be other issues to deal with more than just a little prudent thermal regulation. Alright, so what do you do if it's too cold? I've never done any winter bike touring. Winter touring just doesn't sound like a vacation to me. It sounds more like an expedition. If you've ever bike toured through the mountains, even in the summertime, it can feel like winter. There's that word again, hypothermia, too little heat. Remember, 3 things, cold, wet, and wind. And when you're bike touring in the cold, you've already got 2 of them. All you need is a little wet to complete the trifecta. But I'm sure if you spend a decent amount of time outdoors, you know the dangers of hypothermia. Tell ya, my old dad, bless his soul, he wasn't the smartest guy in the world, but he knew how to dress for the weather. He worked outside in those cold Chicago winters. Here's the key to staying warm. Dress in layers. Keep your head and neck warm. That's where you lose about 80% of your heat. Cover your ears. Keep your hands and your feet warm. Cycling is a pretty vigorous activity, somewhere between walking and running, so you're going to generate some heat. That's good and bad. If you're cold, bundle up. Pedal a little harder. In short order, you'll be warm enough. The downside of that is if you keep chugging along like that, pretty soon you're going to start sweating. And when you start sweating, you're going to build up a layer of moisture next to your skin. That's what leads to hypothermia. So, before you start sweating, you got to start peeling layers. What I usually do is I open up the collar on my coat and let a little heat out, so it doesn't build up too much. Take your hat off. Lift up the flaps on your ears. Let a little heat out. Might be time to peel a layer or 2. Thermal regulation is an art and a science, and finding that sweet spot between sweating and shivering is not always easy. I train on level ground, and I thought I had it figured out, how many layers to wear when the temperature's below 40, when to start peeling layers as you go down the trail. And then I went down to Mississippi for spring break to ride the Natchez Trace Parkway. I wasn't used to the rolling hills on the parkway, and it threw my thermal regulation all off. On the uphills, I would sweat like crazy, and then when I crested the top and start coasting down the other side, I'd freeze. But hey, I guess that's bike touring. I've done almost all my bike touring in the summer, so the other thing I wasn't ready for on that trip was the freezing rain. On day 2, I was just south of Nashville where it was snowing, and just north of Tupelo where it was raining. So I was right in that spot where it was kind of like not quite snowing and not quite raining, but it was just slow, steady precip all day at about 38 degrees Fahrenheit. I wore several layers, including 2 rain jackets and a pair of rain pants. My feet got soaked. As long as I kept pedaling, I stayed warm. I took very few breaks, and they were short. I was pretty miserable, and it was about the closest I ever came to full-blown hypothermia. When I got to my hotel room in Tupelo, the first thing I did was take a nice long hot shower. Before I got to my room, when I was checking in, I was talking to this nice lady. She saw that I was bike touring and that I was soaking wet, and she asked me why I chose to go bike touring on a day like that. Trouble is, I really didn't have a good answer. So I told her I was on vacation. It would be nice if you could custom order the weather. You know, like ordering a steak. Medium well, please. But when you're out bike touring, there's no guarantee that the weather's going to be cool and sunny with a light tailwind just the way you like it. You're going to face a whole range of conditions, so you better be prepared. And sometimes it can get a little extreme if you're not careful. But if you do your homework and you're prepared, you can get through those rough spots. So keep an eye on the weather, stay safe, and have an adventure. Thanks for watching, and if the weather's okay near you, go ride your bike.